and there's absolutely no possibility to edit all of this, so you're on the spot. I'm totally kidding. I can edit if we need to.
Well, that's good. It makes me feel better. Although I don't know, it's funny because I was just thinking how we've never actually had a conversation, and now it's like, welcome to my podcast. I kind of like it.
Well, that's part of what I do. It's a good way. Like, there's a lot of people that I kind of connect with through social media. We talk a lot that way, but we don't actually, talk. So this is kind of a fun way to do it, because now everyone gets to see it, kind of be the fly on the wall, and it helps us all get to know you a little bit better. So,
for choosing me and for giving me the chance to kind of hear myself on I've never been on a podcast, just FYI. So
perfect. Well, I'm Shane from Toronto, and you are Christina from Chicago.
Right.
And although our cities are, well, first of all, not that different and not that far away from each other, there's this line between us. It's mostly an invisible line. I mean, they've got stuff set up there, but it's mostly an invisible line. But that line is like absolutely something that neither you or I can cross. And that's because there's this thing going on in the world that in order to avoid censorship on this podcast, I call the joy. So you can catch the joy, you can spread the joy. The joy may have been leaked from a lab, we're not sure, but it may have. And one of the solutions to the joy is this lollipop that they're giving people.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then,
that's awesome. I need to use those words more often on my platform because I keep getting censored. So that's a good idea.
Of course, there's those of us who are sugar-free, which brings us back to the border, because you can't cross that border. I can't cross that border. That border cannot be crossed by people who are not lollipopped without, jumping through massive hoops, which, is just one of many things in the world that seem kind of broken because of the joy. But I've noticed that, you've had to deal with it because you're a teacher, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. And, teachers are kind of being hit hard by this because it's a lot of debate around our children, and rightly so. So I wanted to kind of have you on and give you an opportunity to talk about that, because I know it's something you're kind of passionate about. And more than that, I kind of consider this like a library of people. So I kind of just, get to know what brought you to today.
I love that. I love Library of People. Yeah, you told me that when I asked about your podcast. I was like, what's going on? What are we talking about? And you're like, you're a library. I have a Library of People. You're one of the books. So just tell stories. And I really love that. Yeah, it's, we are living in very interesting times. And, I'm struggling right now because I often feel like, and I'm sure you felt that before too, or maybe you've just been more confident than me, but I often feel like my way of thinking out there in the real world is so different and so misunderstood. And so, right now, our school is not, we don't have to be lollipopped, but I do have to get tested. Can we say tested? Maybe we should find some metaphor for being tested weekly.
Tested is okay. I let tested and lockdown go because I don't think they're so,
Right. They're not very, yeah. So anyways, so that's the option that I opted for. It's just, I think that people in my community, at least, and at school, I don't think that they truly understand what this means. I think that most of them have a deep trust in authority, and they have a deep trust into the way this system has been set up. And I often ask myself, like, why don't I trust that system? Or why are some people distrustful of the system? And why are so many very, very trusty? And so I don't know, like, if you've ever asked yourself that, but the people that I talk to at our school, teachers, administrators, and I don't talk to a lot of them because this is still something that people just don't talk about. You kind of keep things to yourself. It's a divisive time. But it seems like the people that don't see my point are the people that are like, there are scientists out there who are working really hard to come up with the cure for whatever this is, right? Whether it was leaked from a lab or not, like they don't seem to get into that, too much. It comes from a place of, having compassion and empathy for other people. And, we can definitely get into that and talk about that. But it's almost like a very simple way of explaining things. Like there are these scientists who have developed this through science, which has saved humanity over the course of, the past few decades. Why aren't you on board with it? It's really that simple. And then it's very difficult to say, true, but here's why, here's why I think we still have to question things. And it just becomes a very difficult conversation to have, because I just feel like I'm in the minority. I just feel like people look at me like, what do you mean you want like freedom to choose for your own body? This is different. This is a virus. This affects everybody. You don't get that choice anymore. And then they bring up polio. And I was actually talking to a lawyer yesterday just about, like if the lollipop were to be mandated at a job, what would be my options? And I, quickly became pretty discouraged, because it was, the lawyer, and clearly I went to the wrong lawyer, but he said, the only way out of this is to get the lollipop. And I was like, okay, well, thank you for your time. I don't think that you're the right fit for me. But my point being, there's just this thinking is so prevalent out there. And I don't know. Part of it is media propaganda that has been, present in our system for generations. This didn't happen in the last 10 years, right? This is like, it's been decades of programming, this deep trust in the system that most people have. So I think that's my, that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. And I do feel a little bit like I'm in the minority when it comes to out there in the real world. When I come online and I find my people and I find my community, I think in the same way that I found you, it feels like I'm not alone. But the online world doesn't always translate to real. I'm sure you know that it doesn't always translate to real world. And so, yeah, I don't. It's just been it's been a little discouraging. That sounds pretty negative. We're going to need to switch this around.
Well, it is a bit discouraging, just because, like, and a lot of those arguments are kind of invalid, because, the vaccines that a lot of people reference, they're kind of lumping this one in with it, even though that's not necessarily a fair thing to do, because this particular lollipop doesn't work the same way the other ones do. And absolutely, doesn't have the testing that the other ones did, right? So it's really hard to get that across to people without them calling you and putting you in the anti-lollipop category, right? Like, I'm not an anti-lollipop person. Like, there's medicine out there that is good, and there's medicine out there that is bad. But if I choose not to have a particular type of lollipop because that particular lollipop doesn't benefit me, and I see, at least for myself, that the potential negative effects could outweigh the potential benefit effects, then I don't see why I have to do that in order to keep a job. One thing about my job, which I think is kind of funny, because they did put the mandate in and I can no longer work there, they stopped testing. So it's like they've now mandated this lollipop, which doesn't actually work, right? Like, it doesn't stop people from getting it. It doesn't stop people from spreading it. It minimizes symptoms at best, right? Like, that's the only thing that it still potentially has going for it. We're not even sure on that yet, but we'll see. At best, that's it. And yet they're not even testing the staff anymore. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, it should be, the testing needs to still exist if we know that they can still get it, right?
Right. And props to you for quitting your job and like standing up for your beliefs. That takes a lot of courage. I've thought about that too. And I don't know what my future brings. I do want to find, you know, a job that is in line with my, you know, with my beliefs. I definitely think that's important. Otherwise, you know, my soul is like screaming out, like, don't, right? And I've often felt my soul screaming out that in this way, just in the last year of going to work. I think at the end of the day, it's really a matter of, do you allow a one size fits all mandate that does not take into account any kind of like biodiversity or individual health needs to to win? Because I mean, that's what this really is, right? We I don't want to talk too much about you know, my school, but I I happen to talk to people at school who I think most of the cases that we've had at my high school have been teachers and students who have been vaccinated, you know, and these are not teachers who test every day, right? Like I do, or every week, like I do. And, you know, here they are. And I think that we're so afraid of talking about health. We're so afraid of talking about obesity. We're so afraid of talking about these things because of this culture of like shaming that has been, you know, in our system for so long. People just feel like, I would rather have a donut and be kind to someone else than actually tell them the truth, right? Because we're afraid of backlash, you know, and so why are we treating people the same way? People have different like I feel like I honestly, I'm not even against the vaccine as much as I am against the idea of not having the choice for my own body. I know for a fact that if I were to get COVID, I probably would be okay. Like I have that confidence in my own body's ability. So I don't want to take something that's just, it's just unnecessary. Like I don't, you know, it's not tested. I don't know how my body's going to react to it. I've never had an mRNA vaccine. Now I'm saying the word. Oops.
That's okay.
In my body before. So I don't know how my body's going to react. And I'm really confident that I am healthy enough that I can manage if I happen to catch the joy, if I happen to catch this joy, right? And so I'm not given that chance though. And I am treated the same as a person who maybe has other health problems, who maybe needs to get the lollipop because it is a matter of like, it is going to potentially save their life, or it's potentially going to make the symptoms less severe. And, you know, being a teacher, that's the craziest thing of all, is that for the past decade that I've been teaching for 10 years, we've always tried to not have a one size fits all approach to educating the children. We understand that children learn differently. We have been differentiating instruction for 10 years. It's been such a push in education, you know, with good reason. I believe in it. I know I've been teaching for so long. I understand that, you know, children learn very differently. But now we're doing the same thing with healthcare, and no one's seeing the problem. And that just kind of blows my mind. I don't know. I mean, where do you think this is going? How is it going to end?
Well, you know, I remember I've looked into this technology since before it got used for this lollipop, and a lot of the like early uses for it, or potential early uses for it, do involve, you know, things that are beneficial to us, like the idea of injecting a specific type of virus into a cancer cell with this technology, which would be the way to deliver it, which kills the cancer cell. And I mean, like, that sounds great. And I have this funny feeling that it was almost as if they just needed a widespread platform to be able to test this on humans, and have kind of taken advantage of this joy situation in order to pull that off, because there's just so much about it that doesn't make sense. Like, I've tested positive for the joy. I tested negative, I guess 4 days later, technically. I felt nothing. I had no symptoms. I honestly, like, I went into that work that morning went into work that morning thinking I was hungover because I had drank the night before. I had a little bit of a headache. I felt a little bit run down. That was about it. And you had to test when we go in the door, which is the rapid test, as opposed to the deeper PCR swab, and it came back positive. So they sent me home, which great. And, asked me how I was a couple of days later, felt fine. So they asked me to go do a test. I did a test, came back negative. Okay, great. And then when the mandates came out, they were like, I've had bad reactions to medications before, specifically one of the vaccines. I got a booster vaccine sometime when I was a teenager and ended up in the hospital with it. So it's, I have an allergy to two of the ingredients in this particular one as well, right? So I didn't want to take it. I feel like the way I put it is I can't take it, right? And when they first dropped the mandate on me, then I said, well, I have antibodies. Like, I've had this, right? Like I have natural antibodies. Can't I just prove that? And they were like, we don't think we can accept that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to prove that anyways. And we'll go from there. So that was my first step as I went. It costs like $200, like $199.99 plus tax. But I got my antibodies test and it came back with, I have very strong antibodies to the joy, and stronger than, if not equal to, freshly dosed with lollipops. So I bring that back to work and they're just like, yeah, there's no exemption for this. I'm like, I'm literally more protected than anybody else in this building, right? Like I'm to be honest, one of the healthier people in this building. And you're telling me that in fear of like my health, and because it can only be in fear of my health, right? Because even if I did take the lollipop, I could still get the virus and give it to the residents, right? Who can still get it despite them all having had the lollipop, right? So if I have, an equal ability to catch the joy and spread the joy, then what else are you telling me that you're worried about other than my own personal health? And if my personal health is something that I'm willing to take responsibility for, once again, what is your logic?
Well, I think them, taking your antibody test would mean that they actually, individualize health needs, and they just, I think it's easier to say like, just do the thing, just like, like, why am I making that, like, and like part of it can be like, I can understand if it's like a large corporation that, or maybe they don't have like the resources to like do that. Cause I know like, in education, I keep going back to education because that's what I know, we've always known that students need to be treated and thought very differently because they all learn differently. Oh, hold on one second. I'm so sorry. That was my 4-year-old niece, who lives, they live upstairs. So she's always like, I think I promised her that we would bake cookies this afternoon. And so I am horrible for, I had to be like, we're going to bake cookies later.
You can blame me. Just blame me.
Oh yeah. There's so much guilt. I mean, I'm not even a mom. She's my niece, and there's still so much guilt with when you promise a child something, they remember. Like they'll be there the next morning, they'll wake up and they'll be like, so today's the day you said we're going to do that. And I was like, oh, whoa. Yes, I guess I did. There's really no going around it. So anyways, going back to what we were talking about, like I can understand, because in education, the argument has always been like, we don't have resources to offer the kind of, individualized education that students need. We just don't. And so I guess, you can argue, I'm sure companies can argue the same thing. Like, hey, we have this lollipop. It's the easiest way for us to make sure that we are keeping this public health crisis under control. And, this is a podcast, so people can't see my public health crisis, but it's kind of like saying like, this is the cheaper way. This is the way that it's easiest. And that's never the way. That's never the way that's going to come for individual needs in a society. But that's just kind of how things are done always, right?
Yeah.
It's a societal problem. Yeah, I don't know. I think that right now, there are enough people who just see through this. And, in the beginning, and I'm sure you've been in this, thinking outside the box world for probably your whole life, right? So do you remember back when you used to think about certain things and like you really were one of the only ones or one of the very few?
That's most of my life. Yes.
It's most right. And so yeah, for me too. And that's probably how we kind of connected energetically, where maybe we have like a past life together. We'll talk about that. We can get into that too. But so the point is that maybe that's why God, I think I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What was I saying?
But we were talking about like individualizing the resources that would be required for individualizing this. But I mean,
Right.
and when it comes to individualizing this type of thing, I mean, if the vaccines are making as much money as they are making, that means they cost as much money as they cost. And what is cheaper, a lollipop or a test?
Right.
Right. I'm going to guess that it's the test. Right. And therefore the resources argument can even be invalidated, right? And I think, especially a lot of people like maybe listening to this don't understand. They've probably seen me speaking out about this lollipop and probably think that I'm like anti-lollipop, and that's not what it's about. And I'm not opposed to anyone having taken it if they wanted it. And despite any agenda that I see behind the curtains, so to speak, that's got nothing to do with anyone's individual choice. In fact, what I feel like I'm standing up for is your personal choice to take it or not take it. And I'm not taking it because, first of all, I don't really want to submit to this system of, having the government decide what I can do and what I can't do based on something that's truly not harmful to anyone else. If this lollipop were at a point where it was 100%, you can't get it, you can't spread it, then I could understand you wanting me to take it. But if at the end of the day, the only person who's really going to suffer is me, and I've already had it, it's very unlikely that I'm going to get it again. And I didn't suffer. I didn't take any resources from anybody, right? I didn't even take any extra vitamin C out of Walmart. So it's not like the argument that, oh, well, you shouldn't get healthcare then. Well, okay. But I also, like, I work out. I look after myself. I have a diet that I'm conscious of. And like, what about all these other things that I am doing to not be, I haven't been in the ER or the hospital in years, right? Like, what about all of those things? None of them seem to matter because, I might catch joy. I might end up hospitalized for it. But, I just don't understand the mentality of trying to say that I'm doing something wrong to society by being responsible beyond the person who's, eating McDonald's every day and not looking after themselves and therefore will have a really hard time if they get sick with anything. Right. So.
Well, and yeah, and I don't even think it's ethical to require someone to take an experimental drug to protect someone else. Because again, this idea, and I've talked about that on my Instagram, this idea of like personal responsibility just goes out the window then. Then it doesn't matter, like if I have to get lollipops so that I can protect your health, then I should also be able to smack the cheeseburger out of your hand at 2 a.m. when you showed up home drunk and you're eating crap food or whatever the case may be. Like, because then it's like where, like we still have the responsibility to make our own choices for our own body. It doesn't look like we do right now, but we should. And at the end of the day, I think, the body is the front line defense for everything else in life. This isn't just about joy. This isn't about catching joy. There's going to be other types of joy-like things and viruses. I guess we can take viruses out there. This isn't the only one. And so, if our bodies aren't healthy, then this is going to be a continuous need to take pharmaceuticals, and that's fine because again, some people need to take pharmaceuticals. Some people are not willing to, I don't know, wake up at 6 a.m. and go for a run, that's fine. Again, personal responsibility. Everyone should have the choice to make whatever choice works for them in this moment, in this lifetime, right? Like, if I want to sit on the couch all day long and have chips, then that's my right, and I could do that. But then if I choose to not do that, and if I choose to wake up in the morning and go for a run, I don't want to be treated the same. I want to be able to make, the choices that I need from my body. And this is really what this is all about. It's really not about being anti anything. And, I'm glad you said that, because we don't have a middle ground anymore. You can't have a conversation with anyone. Automatically, we love labels. I mean, like, if people could stop labeling, I think this world would be a better place. But you cannot have, like, I feel like as people, we just love putting people in a box. We just need to know, like, what they're about. So and we do it too. I do it too. We label people all the time because when we understand what they're about, they're less confusing to us. And then it's like, it's almost like they pose less of a threat. Like, okay, I know what you're about. Now I'm not scared of you, kind of thing. And it's like a real harmful thing to do, because even in this whole, nature of, what we have right now in the world with politics, there's no complexity of character anymore. It's black and white. And so many people are just out there who don't have an identity in this climate. They are who they are. They have different beliefs that may be, left, right, progressive, whatever. But yet, if they express one thing from one side, then they're pushed there in the hands of, in the eyes of everybody else. And that's why people are afraid to speak up. They don't want to be labeled. They don't want to be, it's amazing to me that not a lot of people speak their minds about this. Even, and sometimes because I'm so outspoken, I, fall into the habit of thinking like, well, everyone should do this. This is the only way out. And then I have to kind of stop myself and say, everyone can do whatever they want. Like, this isn't about, but people are afraid. And it's because of the climate that we've created, in which we don't, we're afraid to say what we mean. Even about, I guarantee you, most of the people at my work who have heard me talk about this probably think I'm some nutty anti-lollipop person who doesn't believe in science. These are people who don't actually know me, and that's okay. It's not my responsibility to, to help them understand who I am in any way. But it's just, again, like, you're against this and automatically you're labeled a certain way. You're thrown into a political party too. And this lollipop issue, I'm sure you know this. This is across both, political sides. In Canada, it's different. In America, we have the left and the right now. It's crazy. I know that's probably not the case there. But people from both sides are against it. It's not just the conservatives. I know a lot of people who even have gotten the lollipop who are still against the mandates, because they see through it, and they understand that was a choice that they made for their own body, but they would not want that choice pushed on anybody else.
Well, it's like we fight in so many other ways to not have choices pushed on us, right? Like, that's a lot of what, those categories that you're talking about, that's a lot of what spawned them, whether we're talking about gender or pronouns or, just even like personal rights. Like, on one side of the fence, we're fighting for these things. And on the other side of the fence, we're telling people that they don't deserve them or they shouldn't have them, right? And it really doesn't make much sense at all. It's it's been building up too. It's not like the joy hit and now this is all here. You're American, so you understand. Like, you just had that 4 years of Trump and all of this was happening with that. I think that's kind of where we see this downward slide, and that just happened to slide right into the joy, right? And then now that ball gets picked up and it's ran with, and we have things like, the Kyle Rittenhouse debates going on, and all these different fights amongst people, all these different things causing this division, further pushing us from one side to the other. And it's hard not to feel like there's some force at play there, right? It's hard not to feel like that's by some type of design. And I think that because of that, it's really important for us to have these conversations, right? To be able to, you know, be able to speak your mind, and not like, I would have, obviously you and I agree on a lot of these subjects, if not all of them. I would have the same conversation with someone who disagreed, because it's just, we need to be able to voice this. We need to be able to figure this out together. And if we're constantly pushing, you know, you're left, I'm right, so we can't talk anymore, then we're not going to actually solve any of the problems that either side wants to solve.
Yeah. And, you know, I was hoping actually that you would say that and we would get to talk about the forces at play, because I think that's where the interesting stuff is, right? When you talk about, and, you know, I kept trying to think about how me and you connected initially on Instagram. And I realized that it was through Ryan Mintz, because I was following him. And I think he must have reposted something of yours that I, you know, agreed with. And then I followed you. So speaking of Ryan Mintz, like, he's often opened my mind about, you know, the forces at play. And so, like, can we talk about that? Can we talk about like the, I don't know, good and evil, I guess in the simplest terms, if you want to call it, the you know, the good and evil of the world, and like what those forces are like, and what do you think is happening truly here, from even like a consciousness level, and like, I don't know, we can get into that if we have time. I know that's like a big topic to get into. We could probably talk for 3 hours.
Well, yeah, I think, like, personally, and I mean, we can say whatever we want. I'll just warn you, don't read the comments. But yeah, just like, I think that we're seeing some type of evolution in humanity right now, and I think that we have two different poles of what direction that evolution takes. I think that we've got, let's call it, human forces that wants to keep things not necessarily the same, but at least in the same arena, so that they can still control things in the same way that they always have. Obviously, they're going to need new toys due to the implementation of technologies, but I think that that's kind of their agenda, is to kind of, in a way, at least keep control of the population, keep humans in one path. And I think that we have something that's beyond our understanding, or at least our scientific vocabulary to explain, pushing us in another direction, and that, if you want to call that, more of a natural direction. And I think that it's manifesting itself in a lot of different ways, and one of those ways is kind of this division. It's almost like there are the people who want to cling on to the safety net of the system that they've always known, and then there's those of us who kind of recognize this calling within it all, and are kind of like letting nature take its course, and letting ourselves express what's kind of bubbling out of us. I think of the beginning of the joy and how there was like different reactions to it. Like, some people kind of bunkered down and used it as time for self-development, got into some new hobbies, got it into some ideas and concepts that they may not have been into before. And then other people drank themselves into a stupor. Right. And like, just as an example of, you know, taking another path towards that. And I think that we're kind of seeing that in all facets of humanity right now, that it's like there are these people who want to cling on to this safety, and I think that's like an irresponsible path, right? And then there's those of us who kind of are willing to take self-responsibility, and I don't know, I don't want to say have faith in nature, but, you know, have the courage to let nature take its course. And I think that that's kind of the root of what's going on. And then on top of that, we have people who benefit from keeping everything the same, fighting really hard to keep everything the same. And I think that's where a lot of the political agendas that we see playing out, the mandates with the joy and all the division that's coming from, I think it's that group of people feeding that fear-based frequency, if you will. perpetuating that problem. And, I feel like, at least for myself, and I would include you in that category, that we're more willing to, see where nature actually wants to take us. And, I always go back to the phrase, nature rewards the brave, and wanting to see what that natural outcome would be if we did come together, instead of further separating ourselves from our nature and nature in general, putting ourselves in the metaverse and separating ourselves from it. There's a rising group of us who would rather, we can see why this system is unsustainable, and there's some ways that we can make it sustainable again. And yeah, I think that's, the gist of it really, is that it's almost like natural versus artificial is kind of at this, I don't want to call it a war, but at this like crossroads, and we're trying to navigate it.
I mean, I agree. Natural versus artificial. Yeah, it makes me think about, like, even just the fact that, we are so warned against taking any kind of herbs or, medication that isn't patented, that can't be sold, that isn't like, pharmaceutical produced. And yet when, when you want to take a pill that's, a pharmaceutical pill, you get that prescribed within 10 minutes of seeing a doctor for the first time. Even though side effects are, I'm sure you've seen, the side effects on a label. I wonder often, because you talked about like kind of like being free from the system. I wonder how much freedom we can count on when we are sort of born into a system and like kind of like stamped with a social security number. And like, I know it sounds very extreme, but like when you think about just the whole idea of being part of a modern society, it kind of automatically takes away a little bit of freedom, and it puts it into the hands of like government and like we get a social security number. I mean, we are part of a society, right? We have credit scores. We don't fully own our houses. I mean, we can pay mortgage for 15 years, but if you don't pay your taxes for 3, your house is gone, right? Like that kind of stuff, right? And so, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. So in that regard, when you think about that, we aren't completely free, right? And so it's like, what's one, and I'm sure like, this is why, a lot of people do trust the system, because they have been in the system. They were born in the system. I don't think anyone ever questions like childhood vaccination, schedule. I mean, maybe now more, but it's been 4 decades of children just, being given vaccine lollipops, different kinds of lollipops at birth. And it was science, and we understood that it's like part of what needs to be done. Nobody read a label. The doctor doesn't know what's in there. The doctor just gives it because it comes from, the pharmaceuticals, and it's science. And they, we've, eradicated diseases, according to their records with these lollipops. So it's almost like you're born into a system. Your parents are, putting 47 doses of lollipops in you by the time you're 2, because that's what the system says that you need to do. And now for the first time in a very, very long time, we are all of a sudden coming as a humanity, as a consciousness, like saying, wait a minute, to all of that because of joy, because of this, right? And so I feel like in that regard, it's almost like a really beautiful awakening of where are we going and what have we been allowing, and should we have, been allowing that to be done to us? Because it like, I think it forced us to kind of stop and say, do we fully trust the system that we are a part of? Do we believe that they have our best interest? Like, are we just kind of controlled? And if we really want to be free, then we can't own anything, and all we can do is go and start a commune somewhere in the middle of, the mountains, and have our own food and not be reliant on the Amazon trucks who come in the city every day, the hundreds of them, right? Like we're part of this. And so I feel like joy has really given us a chance to kind of look at that, but look at all of that, not just this one, right? But it was like this lollipop has given a chance for us to question everything else. Do you ever feel that way?
Well, absolutely. At least I've been on one side of the fence for my whole life, and kind of understanding that there's things in this world that people need to question. And, through a multitude of actually different events over the last few years, it's kind of led more people to questioning it, which I think is a really good thing. It's kind of made me personally happy, because I've been questioning these things, forever, or at least I've known that there is a reason to question these things forever. And so with this lollipop and the joy and everything, people are starting to look at things like, how are the social media apps messing with our psychology and our politics and everything else in our world? How are the pharmaceutical companies influencing governments and different policymakers? How are these medical establishments that we put all these trusts in spending our money, and what kind of research are they really doing, right? Because there's been a lot that's come out about that a lot of people had never considered. And then at the same time, I mean, we've got other events, like I already brought out the Kyle thing, like we've got all these different things that it's very, very clear that we've been being lied to about a lot of different topics. And I really hope that people will follow that questioning through to its end. Like, how far does that lie go? And not just leave it at, well, whatever. Like we've done for so many years, especially speaking as a Canadian. That's kind of what our government, our people do, is they hear, like, X politician did this, and they're like, instead of being like, no, like that person works for you. That person is supposed to have your best interests in play, and you're just brushing it under the rug like it didn't even happen, despite this very clear-cut evidence that yes, it did and it shouldn't have. And in many cases that happen in Canada, it's very illegal. Obviously, it happens all over the world, but speaking from the Canadians' perspective, that
I know you guys I've heard really awful things from Canada just in the last couple of months too. You guys have it really bad over there.
Our government is just like, there is no talk about anything other than joy is going to kill everybody and everyone needs a lollipop. Yeah. It's time to get the lollipop. That's all we hear. There's zero discussion of treatment. There is zero discussion of alternative. There's zero discussion of the science as it's evolving, which is the other thing that people, one mind-boggling thing is how much we've watched the science change over the last year. It doesn't stop people from saying, trust the science, right? Like, okay, if I go back to the beginning of this and I trusted everything I was told, I would be in a lot of trouble, because now we know that this is true, right? So, but no, even that in and of itself should be enough for people to go, well, maybe, instead of jumping off of a bridge because they're telling me to, I should hold off for a second, gather some more facts, and maybe let this play out. And how many indicators do we need?
Do you think that we should do that? Let this thing play out and not feed it energy? I think about that often, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I am not posting anything on Instagram that isn't like super high vibe. I don't want to feed more into the fear narrative that you just mentioned. Maybe maybe that's the way. I don't know.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think that you can get really caught up in it, and not a lot of people are looking after their energy all that well, right? So I don't think a lot of people are really all that well equipped to to devote that kind of energy. But I think that if you are, you know, looking after your own energy and making sure that it's not draining you, it's just, we all generate more energy than we truly need in a day. And what we do with that is up to us. And I don't think there's any harm in putting it into spreading awareness. And I feel like the more you see other people speak up, more people start speaking up, right? Like I've been speaking in a community that people didn't want to talk in for years. And I've now watched, you know, 2 or 3 generations of people come up kind of, I don't want to say behind me and put it in that context, but come up after what I've done. And like I've heard from them, if I didn't hear you speaking about this, I never would have had the confidence to do so myself. And I would imagine that there's a lot of people out there right now who feel that way about these topics, who feel like, you know, if I talk about this, everyone's going to hate me. I'm going to lose friends. I'm going to lose family. And, you know, unfortunately, that might be true. But, you know, quality over quantity is a thing. And I would think that anybody who, you know, I personally have never gone through my social media account, seen someone post something that I absolutely disagree with and been like, fuck that person, right? I've been like, I don't know about that. But I've never been like, there's a problem with that person or fuck that person. And I think if we can stop ourselves from that reaction and maybe just take an honest look at, you know, because this is happening with our brothers and our sisters and our best friends and our wives and our husbands and our aunts and our uncles and our grandparents, like this division, to actually put yourself in their shoes and see it from their perspective might change your viewpoint on it, right? And instead of just assuming, well, the news says that my brother is an anti-vaxxer because he thinks that he doesn't need the lollipop.
Right. Right. And I think at the end of the day, it is very dangerous to surround ourselves with people who agree with us, to be in a, you know, echo chamber. That can be dangerous too. I definitely agree. And I think the only way to get out of that is to, like, I really try my best to follow all kinds of accounts, even like politically, that I might not agree with, because, and sometimes, you know, I do get triggered, or sometimes I do say like, oh, that I definitely don't agree with that. But it's like, okay, I almost want to see it, because I want to make sure that it's helping me solidify my own beliefs, right? It's kind of like the counter argument, like when I teach students how to write, and you know, I always teach them, like, if you want to argue for something, or you want to make others believe the same way that you do, or you want to persuade, then you have to offer a counter argument. You have to say, now I know you might think that. You got to get inside their heads, and you got to like already negate the things that you know they're going to disagree with before they even get a chance to, if you want to win an argument, right? That's the art of writing an argument. So like I do that often. I try to find the counter argument, because I think it's important for my own understanding of the world around me, and for my own growth. And you know, at the end of the day, and I don't know how much time, you know, you had intended this to go for, or how much time we have left.
We're okay. You know, worries.
Okay. But, you know, at the end of the day, I often think that, you know, it comes down to like people, I don't know, like we can it's important for us to speak our truth, and it's important for us to be who we are and be courageous and say what we mean. It's also okay to change our minds. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. There are things that I've posted on my Instagram 2 years ago that I would never post again, because I no longer agree with those things. And, you know, sometimes I think, wow, there's such a danger into putting yourself and your beliefs on Instagram or on social media in general, because sometimes there's a version of you that kind of remains imprinted in someone's mind forever. And then you go and change, and that person doesn't know that. And it's this whole like, you know, because I remember people like unfollowing me 2 years ago. Who knows what I said about whatever I believed with the information I had at that time. And, you know, I got unfollowed by a coworker, for example, right? And then it's like you now you spend the rest of the 2 years, working with that person, and they look at you like, oh, I know what you posted 2 years ago. And it's like, I'm not even that person anymore. But like, it's that idea of like, putting yourself on social media, right? It's people have to understand, and I remind myself that all the time, that we grow and learn and we change our minds every day. And people who are not able to change their minds, those people have more growth to do, I think. And not in like a judgmental way, but I'm just saying, like, it's really hard to say like, I was fucking wrong about that. Like that was, I don't even know what I was thinking. That's all I knew. That's all the information I had. And I'm sorry if I offended someone, or, but I also think that once people understand that, and once people meet you at your level, like energetically, like you almost can't upset people, because people understand that like how they perceive you is really a reflection of themselves and how they see themselves. And so it's like, you sort of become very tolerant of others. You also understand that you meet people where they are, like I like to say this, like everyone is on a different level of consciousness. And levels of consciousness, they go from low to high, right? And so I think some people are like low level of consciousness. I think most of us are sort of in the middle, and then there's like really high consciousness people, right? And so it's important to understand that when you're having a conversation with somebody who maybe disagrees with you, it doesn't come from any evil place. It just means like they're at a different level of consciousness. Maybe their understanding is not there. Maybe this is their first lifetime around. Maybe that, like maybe they're just a very innocent, unexperienced soul who has not had many lifetimes. But I don't know. So that's just to say that all of that is just to say that people don't look at someone's Instagram post and are like, okay, you've convinced me. I didn't think that, but wow, reading this quote that you posted, now I'm convinced. I'm, releasing all my old beliefs. It doesn't quite work that way, right? I think that the way that we reach people is through understanding and through kindness and compassion. And when you have conversations with people and they see that you mean well, that you are not looking to be this egotistical, like I'm right and you're wrong type of person, and you just want to help others and make the world a better place. That's all we really want to do. I mean, I think that's what most people want to do, not all. I think that at that point, like none of this becomes as important as like the kindness that you give and the energy that they feel. Because oftentimes you have a fight with someone in your head, and when you go talk to them, it's like, oh, okay, well, you're not mad. Okay, all right, well, I thought you were going to be horrible. Well, I guess you're not, like it's that kind of thing. Because we can make stories up in our head all we want about who people are, but it's just based on our own perception and how we see ourselves and based on our own fears, right? And so talking to people, and also like don't get offended. Like, you read something that you don't agree with, move the fuck on. Like, read something else. Like, don't think the person's horrible. The person's just where they're at, and move on with your life. I mean, you're going to make your life so much better, right?
Well, yeah, like it's just like why give that energy away? Like it just goes to show, like you were talking about levels of consciousness. Not people aren't very conscious of their own energies, right? And they don't realize how there are a bunch of things out there that work like bait to try and drain you of energy. And that kind of thing is one of them, right? Like it's if you're acting with conviction in the world, then you don't really need to worry too much about any of that, because you're, and what you said there was very important. Like I do the same thing. I always listen to the other side. I think I actually sent you the one Lex Friedman podcast, because that is like the dramatic other side. And I'm like, but if you listen through this, like, yeah, in a way, he's kind of like, he's telling us what we were saying as well, right? So it is a part. And if we didn't understand that side, then we wouldn't be equipped in that way. And I feel like I know a lot of the reason why I do it, and this is probably true for you too, is like it's that part of us that is a teacher. right? And we do want to help people gain a larger understanding of, kind of their environment. So a lot of the time when I'm talking to like musicians or poets or something like that, I always joke that we've got like this superhuman origin story that brought us to that. But that's not true for just arts. It's also true for teachers. So what's the superhuman origin story that brought you to becoming a teacher?
Oh my gosh, believe it or not, I don't really have one like that. What I really loved doing from an early age is like read. Um, and I remember I went to college and majored in English because I knew that that's the place where I could just read literature all day long and talk with my professors about it. Like that was like, we can just read books and talk about it, right? And then after 2 years of English, majoring, I was like, fuck, what am I going to do with my life with this? Like, what can I possibly do with this? And then I was like, I guess I could become an English teacher. That was like, and I know this isn't like this, some inspiring story. I have to be honest, it didn't start that way. The inspiration came later when I actually got into the classroom and I realized that I do have a lot of power to influence young minds, and just the responsibility that comes with that, and the beautiful moments that you can have talking to kids in the classroom. But it started off as like, I want to read The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, and I want to talk about it with a professor that knows what they're talking about, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's kind of how it started. So there was no grand plan for me to become a teacher in any way. I was so terrified of public speaking all my life. I mean, I used to stutter as a child pretty badly. And I don't know when that went away, but I've read a lot that it has to do with like confidence, and I think I was very like different as a child, as you can imagine. And I was very misunderstood. Like my parents were like, what, like, they used to even say like, wow, are you like 80? I was like 6. And so like, I don't think they completely were like equipped to deal with who I was. And as a result, I was sort of like, and this is through no fault of their own. Like, again, they did the best that they could with what they knew at the time, but I was always just kind of not allowed to like shine my light and be who I am. And that told me that I'm not, it created a lot of trauma and a lot of like lack of confidence within myself. Right. And so because of that, the stuttering, and because of that, the lack of like, I was like very afraid to be a public speaker. So when I was studying to be a teacher, I kept thinking like, why am I doing this? Like, how am I going to speak in front of kids? And it turns out that you, like with everything else, it takes a lot of healing of trauma to come into your own and find self-confidence. And once that happens, my studying just kind of went away on its own. The more I like healed myself. And then the more I showed up in front of kids, the first day of teaching, I stuttered in front of kids. I don't even know how I got hired, honestly, but I did. There were some people there who really believed in me. And then the second day I stopped stuttering. Like, it was just kind of like, it's, so that's kind of what brought me here, initially. And I love my job. I mean, despite this weird climate that we're in, and despite me having to go to a place every day that does not acknowledge me as a person who has who should be able to choose for her own body, like that's a lot, and that saddens me. Despite that, I really do enjoy being there. I do enjoy being in the classroom with the students. I think I posted something on Instagram the other day, like, if I'm ever going to get out of education and not be a teacher, it's definitely not going to be because of the kids. It's going to be because of the adults, right?
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you see this. We talked a little bit about, the incoming technology, and the more the world is moving in that direction of technology. Something I've noticed with my own kids, and I love kids, so I observe kids a lot, and just their bond with technology is really, really, really fascinating. It's like they're coming in hardwired, ready to tackle this, something that like people my age or even your age would look at as like this upcoming problem of like something like AI, as just an example, like one of the bigger examples. they're like coming in like hardwired, ready to deal with all of that. And it's been pretty fascinating. I'm wondering how much of that you're starting to see in kids, or if you've noticed it as well.
Oh my gosh. I had kids. So like 3 weeks ago, we had to come up with a hotel spa for the phones. And that's just a really nice way of saying, like, give me your phones when you walk in here and I get to keep them for 45 minutes and you get to sit down and not have them on you. That's what that means. Because I started my year off, and I teach freshmen, so they're ninth graders. You know, first year of high school, they're a little bit scared, but I started my year off and I said, I'm going to embrace technology. These kids have, they grew up with their phones. There's not going to, like, I have to find a way to teach in a way that embraces that, because this is where we're heading. There's no way around it. Technology is beautiful and can help us in many ways. So I had that like thinking going into it. Right. And then 2 weeks into the school year, kids were failing because none of them were listening to a word I was saying. They were just on their phones playing video games. And so I had to kind of step back and say, okay, I don't think that 14-year-olds are responsible enough in their level of consciousness, since we're speaking about level of consciousness in this moment, to really make smart decisions for themselves. Maybe they do need a little bit of adult supervision. Maybe like later on when they're seniors, if I were to teach seniors, like they're 18, like you need to decide if you want to fail, then be on your phone, like that kind of stuff. But with ninth graders, I felt like I'm not doing my job as a teacher if I'm just letting them make those choices for themselves, because they were continuously making bad choices. And it was a way of like, it wasn't even that, it was a way of like avoidance, because cell phones in the classroom are used as a way of, avoiding, like if kids have trouble with school in general, if they, read at a lower level, for example, than the rest of their peers, or if they find it very difficult to keep up with classwork, the phone just becomes a way to avoid that. It's not that they want to fail. It's not that they want to be on their phones, although sure they do, but it kind of like, they just don't want to, they can't do the work. They don't want to do the work. And it's just easier to play a video game on their phone, and they're so used to it. So I really had to look at myself and have an honest conversation with myself and say, okay, I need to have your phones, and I'm going to have your undivided attention for the time that you're in this classroom for 45 minutes. And there was a lot of grunts, and a lot of them didn't like it. And a lot of them were like, well, what if I have an A? And it's like, okay, if you have an A, and we can kind of talk about how to go around that. Maybe you can get some phone time, right? But yeah, I mean, these kids are so not what we are used to. And phones are like part of their identity. And that's kind of scary to me in a lot of ways. But that's a whole conversation that we probably don't even have time to get into. But then there's the other side. And the other side of is like, my teaching is also slowly being replaced by computer programs. We have a lot of them like that teach grammar. I mean, when I started teaching a decade ago, we used to have grammar, like sentence diagramming. You'd write a sentence on the board, and I don't know if this dates me, but like, that's what it was. It was like you diagram the sentence, you underline the verb, and you do it in the class for everyone to see. And now they all do it independently on a system, on a website. And then it's like, so I just have to sit there and make sure they're doing it. So a lot of that is definitely coming in education. I mean, we have entire programs that are just kids learning in front of the computer. It's a way for them to get their like a GED degree without like actually being in high school. We have that too. It's like an online program. But no, I mean, it's coming. It's definitely here. And I think that my role as a teacher is just going to continue to change. It's more like I'm a facilitator. I'm not so much I don't, like I tell my students all the time, like, hey, you don't need me here. Like anything I have to say, you can get on Google. I mean, really just Google it. It's like, we're going to read a short story. Well, you can just get it on Google. You can get a summary of it on Google. You can get an audio on YouTube. You can get the answers to all that. Like, like if you really wanted to do this on your own, you could. Like, this isn't like I hold the key to knowledge like it used to be when me and you went to school, right?
Yeah.
So I think my role is just changing. It's going from me being the keeper of knowledge to me just teaching kids how to critically think because they have the access to the knowledge. That's really it.
So would you say, and I mean, maybe I'm idealizing or being too hopeful here, but maybe the technology in a way could free teachers up to like pay more one-on-one attention with the problem areas instead of being so focused on the general, fundamentals of the lesson. You can kind of let the technology give you the fundamentals, and then when they have questions or special learning needs perhaps, then the teacher has a little bit more free time to do that. Would that work?
Yeah, I definitely think that there are, I mean, technology isn't all evil, and it's definitely made a huge impact in a positive way into, the learning of students. I am worried though about like screen time and like blue light and the amount of time that they spend completely ungrounded in like nature and just kind of being, kids like used to play a lot of sports and be outside a lot. And now they're in front of the computer from 8 a.m. until 3:15 p.m. every day. And then they go home and they might have homework. So they might spend another hour or two in front of the computer. And then the rest of the time, they're probably, if I had to guess, they're not out in their neighborhood playing kickball with the neighbor. They're probably watching TV or playing video games or doing something of that sort. So then it kind of becomes this whole like, when do you get to get some sun, some vitamin D that you need for, in your eyes, some grounding, your feet, like touching the earth, like that kind of stuff. That's really vital for their health and for their health, and to kind of get their bodies just grounded. So like, that's my only concern with the amount of time that kids spend on the screen, really. Blue light, I mean, that it's not helping us. And I know that there's ways around that. You can get the glasses, blue light glasses. But at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know, maybe these kids are just like their DNA is changing to adapt to this new way. I mean, you ever think about that? You're like, maybe that's how things are happening.
Well, that is kind of exactly what I kind of meant by when they're coming in hardwired. I think that there is some type of, I've mentioned it already, like I do believe that we're going through this evolution, and I think that's part of it, is that kids are, more equipped to deal with this direction that we're going in that's very different than how things were when you and I were kids, right? Like I had a teacher friend also tell me that she noticed kids stopped skipping school as much with cell phones because they would just sit in class and look at their phone instead of, fuck, I need to get out of here. You know what I mean? So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it gets them in the building because it's not so restrictive.
Yeah. But I mean, how much did we learn from skipping school,
That's true too. Some of my best life lessons.
Best and worst all at the same time.
Yes, that's kind of what I mean, definitely.
So you also you do a lot of things for your health as well. You do looking after yourself spiritually, let's put it that way. Where did that kind of start for you? Is that a newer thing in life, or is it something you've always been kind of looking at?
Oh, the spiritual health aspect is sort of something that found me a couple of years ago. I don't know. I was on this like pattern of like dating the same like type of like men, attracting the same types of friendships, and just like I felt like I'm repeating patterns and I'm not like learning the lessons I'm supposed to learn. And so I had this like pretty massive, like, I would call it like it was like a depression. I mean, it really was, but it wasn't so much, now that I look back, it was like the beginning of like my understanding that like some things need to change. It was like the shakeup that I needed. But I went through some pretty dark times. Just a lot of depression, anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of like lack of confidence, a lot of like trauma and patterns that were so ingrained in myself that I never quite like stopped to question where they came from or if they even are serving me in any way at this point. And I was just kind of like on a loop, I guess. And so that whole thing came, dismantled, and it had to do with like the end of a relationship. I had just, ended a relationship with someone I had dated for a couple of years, and that was like really traumatic. And then I continued to go in this like just healing journey, and I started to get interested into spirituality and spiritual health. I'm a Pisces. I'm a Pisces rising, and Pisces are very like spiritually connected people, and I think that I could talk about astrology. There's a lot of aspects in my chart that are very prone to like me questioning the kind of questioning like reality and like being into this sort of thing. Like I'm very spiritually oriented, I guess, is what you'd say. But yeah, I grew up Christian. I grew up in a very like closed system. It was Seventh-day Adventist, but it was sort of like, the good old like organized religion of like everything's a sin and you're going to go to hell kind of thing. And, that's obviously like simplifying it. There were a lot of good aspects about it too, but a lot of it was just very restrictive, like no dancing and no jewelry and no nail polish and, like just things that don't really matter. But it was the understanding of like the community members at the time of like the place where I grew up and like my parents and what they knew and all that stuff. But branched out of that, went through my depression, and then kind of became awakened to a whole new like spiritual side of me that has always been there, I guess. And started getting into I started doing a lot of like past lives reading. The book that changed my life and put me on this new course has been autobiography of a yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda. I never know how to pronounce his first name, but I'm pretty sure it's Paramhansa Yogananda. And he's like, a Hindu guru that started a lot of like spiritual schools in the 1930s and 40s in California. And he came from India, but like his book sort of put me on this new path of like, I guess you can call it new age. I know like new age, that word just has a bad rep with like the religious community because they don't understand it. But I think, that's pretty much what it is. I realize that I'm connected to a higher consciousness, that I'm part of this beautiful consciousness. And I've learned about the chakra system, about the energy system. I've learned about the fact that I'm a light being in a body and, in a physical body. And then that whole, I kind of went, and then now I'm learning how to read tarot. So.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about that. That could be like another, if you want to know more about that, that could be another podcast episode. But yeah, thanks for asking that question. It's just so much to it. And I actually don't even know where I am exactly or how, like, I don't know how to define myself. All I know is that I understand that I have spirit guides that are guiding me. I understand that I have like a higher self, that we all do. And I understand that, we go through lives on this earth or in other dimensions until we kind of learn the lessons that we're supposed to learn as karmic lessons, as they call them. So that's kind of like my belief in a, if I had to put it in 2 sentences there for you.
Very nice. Well, it's kind of funny because you were like, and a lot of people say this to me when I invite them to this podcast. They're like, yeah, I don't know if I'm that interesting. I don't know if we'd really be able to talk for very long. I mean, we just killed like a quick hour and a half, and we could do another hour and a half. Unfortunately, I can't today, but I definitely think we should. I think we just kind of bridged into another series of topics that would love to have that conversation with you. So I will let you go for this time. We will definitely do it again, but I definitely want to say that, it's refreshing for me to get to see someone, have courage in their conviction and stand up for not picking a side, right? And like to kind of stand your ground without having to pick the side, and having the courage to voice your feelings to others and admit when you feel like you have learned that you are wrong, which I have seen you do publicly, and that's a very admirable thing for a human being to be able to do. So thank you very much for today, and we will be in touch, I'm sure.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. I can't believe we've talked for this long. I really admire you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I do think that the way forward is with love, and I think that we have to stay positive. We create our reality. So if we stay positive, then the reality is going to be positive. Or if it's not the way that we wanted it to, then at least just know that we have what it takes to overcome, whatever may come our way. So thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. And bye everybody at home.
Bye.